he is the one in this case who is clearly not wearing the shoes in this relationship. Like, it seems like she's calling all the shots. Imagine, like, who would have ever thought that, like, they would be doing an interview together and the girlfriend is saying, we're not talking about that. I'm shutting this down. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Liam Barwick. This is another edition of Moving the Goalposts. You can follow us across social media at MTGPETB. You can follow the Empty the Bench Network across social media at ETB Network. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DiMart. You can follow Liam at Liam MTGP. You can listen to all Empty the Bench show. You can listen to all Empty the Bench shows on ETBpodcast.com. You can watch all Empty the Bench shows on youtube.com/ETB Network, and make sure to like and subscribe. And you can listen to this show wherever you get your podcasts. And this show, Moving the Goalpost, is presented by Playback. Stay tuned for later in the show to find out more. All right, so big weekend for our Knicks. Big day for the Knicks. Knicks win Game 3 versus Indiana in what has been a roller coaster ride of a series. It's almost as if the series should be 2-1 Pacers and ended up 2-1 Pacers, but two of the games were just flipped, is how I would put it. Game 1 was just an epic, I guess you could say an epic collapse. There's so much to get to, but look, I think that this playoff run with the Knicks just changed my whole view on basketball and how I'm going to view things going forward, because I can't tell you the number of times that games felt completely over, or even when a series felt completely over and it just wasn't. This game 3 felt over for most of the game. For most of the game, it honestly felt over. For a solid, 3 quarters, it felt like the whole game was over. But, yeah, I don't know what your thoughts on this were, but just this whole series in general.
Well, yeah, I agree. I guess I agree with you about saying the games were flipped. Each game has been really even. The final margin has been... The Knicks win, yes, or in Game 3 was actually the biggest margin of victory for either team this series. So it's been pretty even. I just think that the Knicks kind of played themselves out of the series, losing their first 2 games. At home, I really thought that they were going to really have a better response in Game 2 after everything that had happened. And I think the way that Indiana had acted afterwards with the choke sign and more stuff like that. And I thought the Knicks were going to come out and win that. And that felt like a game the Knicks needed to win. Game 2. Certainly Game 3 was a game they certainly needed to win. But it really felt like that. And I was really disappointed in their effort in Game 2. And it's also kind of amazing that it's won the first game in 6, right? The first series in 6, the second series in 6. 12. So it took them 14 games to actually post up Cat in the playoffs and realize that that's probably his best position. And in the fourth quarter. I think that I still am heavily leaning that Indiana is going to win the series, but I think that obviously that was a huge win. And now there is a little bit more pressure on the Pacers. But the fact of the matter is, I would feel still good if I was Indiana, because the Knicks have just, it's almost the way the Knicks have played, Indiana is almost in an advantage not having home court advantage.
It's not that I think they have an advantage not having home court, but I think that home court in this series is a lot less significant than in
all the Knicks series is they
all of them. You're right. Well, that's true about both these teams. Both of these teams travel well. you see a lot of Knick fans. You're going to see a lot of Knick fans in Indiana, and you're going to see a lot of Indiana fans at the Garden. So both these teams travel very well, and there hasn't. And for both of these teams, home court advantage. I mean, the Knicks only lost one game on the road the whole playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't mean that so I think that home court advantage is certainly less significant in this series than in almost any other series for both of these teams because they both travel very well. I mean, look, it's not that unusual to see a team drop the first 2 games at home and then win 2 in a row on the road. That does happen sometimes. And in all of the previous games that they were playing, like the Knicks haven't really shown that there's much of a home court advantage in playing at home. But I mean, I will say, like, the Knicks ended up winning that game, but the Knicks, it feels like we're losing games that we're winning. Like it feels like we're constantly losing because we're winning under such strange circumstances.
It was probably their worst game before the fourth quarter. It was their worst game of the series.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. I think that here's the reason that we feel this. That Knicks fans, like people were talking about, like at halftime. At halftime, if you go on social media, people were writing off this series. People were just writing it off. Like, I mean, if you were to just look at Twitter, just look at Twitter at halftime and look at what some of the people were saying.
Right.
And it was things like, it was like, Thibodeau's coaching is phased out, or people talking about Leon Rose and all of this, and it just felt completely over at that point. And the reason is because the Knicks keep winning these games where they're not playing well. And to me, that does show. I mean, like, it happened against the Pistons. I mean, did the Knicks have a good series against the Pistons? They didn't. And in a lot of the games that the Knicks won against the Pistons, they didn't play good games. But that does happen a lot in sports, and we just forget about it because we don't pay attention to it when other teams do it. And look, I've seen the Warriors win games when Steph Curry has terrible nights. It happens sometimes. And it happens with we just saw the Mets just beat the White Sox, and the Mets played a terrible game. So, it happens all the time. But with the Knicks, they seem to be, and by the way, winning ugly is a skill in and of itself. You need to be able to win ugly. That's a skill in and of itself. And it's good that the Knicks have that skill. But, like, this type of game is one of the reasons, like, where it's one of the reasons I don't obsess over championships for all-time great arguments, because, I mean, our two-star Brunson had a terrible night, and the Knicks were able to win, which, by the way, is a good sign. If Brunson did not have a good night, and Towns didn't have a good night for 3 quarters. I mean, the season was on the brink. Towns and Brunson were playing with 5 fouls. Both of them were playing with 5 fouls, and the Knicks were able to get on a run without Brunson. I never thought I'd see the day where Thibodeau plays 9 players. That's got to be a record for Thibodeau. I remember at halftime, Kenny the Jet Smith said Thibodeau wouldn't play 9 guys on a baseball team. Like that's, and you know what? The Knicks made a whole bunch of lineup changes, and people were critical of these lineup changes that Thibodeau made. But at this point, he had to make adjustments. He had to make changes. And you know what? If he didn't make adjustments or changes, people would criticize that too. People would criticize Thibodeau for not making changes, and he had to do it. I think he had to do it. I mean, like, I'm not necessarily saying the reason is because Hart came off the bench and Robinson started necessarily, but I think Robinson's a valuable player. And I think the biggest problem with the Knicks right now, honestly, the biggest problem with the Knicks is that your 2 best players, Towns and Brunson, are just bad defenders. They're bad defensive players. And the problem is that when you have 2 guys on the floor at the same time who are just bad defenders, it eventually kind of becomes a bit of a liability, I would say. They become liabilities eventually. I mean, as great as they can be on offense. I mean, Cat had the most Cat game we've seen. I mean, like, it was just a whole lot of foul trouble, wasn't great on defense, but just went off in the fourth quarter when we needed him to. That's really just what, and I also will have to say, like, I think the Knicks just deserve a ton of credit. I think Thibodeau deserves a lot of credit. I think the Knicks bench, the guys coming off the Knicks bench deserve a lot of credit. McBride had a great game. The Knicks, unlike in game one, the Knicks made their foul shots at the end of the game. A lot of this game to me was just about fundamentals. A lot of this series seems to me it's about fundamentals. It's the team that's focusing on the fundamentals that seems to be winning these games.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but I think they maybe deserve credit, but as much as they deserve criticism for what happened in the first game as well.
Right. I agree completely. I mean, look, game
also,
one.
I
mean, that was the most. That's just, they're going to make it 30 for 30 about that game, I think. Like, first of all, and by the way, Halliburton doing the choke sign at the end of when he hit the buzzer beater. I mean, first of all, how you don't come out, how that doesn't motivate the team to come out and kick their asses in game two was beyond me. But
that's why I said
the game wasn't even over. Kick their asses in overtime. You could have won that game.
Well, let's be fair for 1 second. Yes, but the Knicks scored the first 4 points of overtime. They got a steal, went to the basket. There was even by Reggie Miller, who is the worst announcer in basketball. He's so blatantly pro-Pacer. He said it. There was a obvious missed goaltending call that would have made it 6 points. Instead, they went and hit a three. And so instead of the Knicks
5-point swing right there.
Right. Instead of the Knicks being up 6, they were up 1. But I agree with you that they needed to come out better in game 2, and they played poorly in game 2. The stupid thing, though, about like what you said about which is just plays into what happened in game 1 too. Like, the stupid thing about what you were saying about how on Twitter, like, a lot of people had written the series off at halftime. At halftime, the Knicks were down 13. In 2025 in the NBA, 13-point lead is almost nothing.
Yeah,
like a 13-point lead in the NBA now, especially at halftime, like, that's a game that's way still in the balance. 13-point game at halftime.
Yeah, and you would think that but here's the thing: you would think that all the people saying that didn't just witness, like, last Wednesday what happened. Right. Like, as if this hasn't been happening all the time, especially with the Knicks and the Pacers. Like, the Knicks and Pacers, like, it's all like they have, like, if the NBA had script writers, that the Knicks and Pacers games is what they would look like if they had script writers. Like, both of these teams are involved in the most interesting games, in the most compelling games. And it's like, were you not alive last week? Like, do you not remember what happened 4 days ago? like that's why it was just so strange that people were writing everything off. And I think the reason for it is the psychology of it. It's the psychology of it. It's Knicks fans. We feel defeated. Like, we felt completely defeated. And it wasn't because we were down. It's because of how bad they were playing.
Yeah.
And on top of losing the first game, losing game 1 in the way that they did. And here's the thing. Like, I felt worse after game 2 than I did after game 1. As bad as the loss was in game 1, as bad of a lead as it was that they blew, I feel like, to me, I thought game 2 told me more about the series than game 1 did. Because you can argue that losing game 1 completely just demoralized the Knicks.
Exactly.
And that's why they came out the way they did in game 2. And that's how I viewed it. That's how I viewed it. Like, to me, I thought they were just not emotionally there in game 2 because of game 1.
Right.
But also, I didn't think that it had to be that, which is why I didn't feel too bad after game 1. Like, I thought that it could just as easily motivate them as it could demoralize them. and that they could come out and win by 1,000,000 in game 2. And that's what I thought would happen. I
Right.
leaned, or at least I leaned more towards that than I did than the other way
Yeah,
around.
I agree. I thought that was more of why I was more would have put the way the series, not the 13-point lead, just the way they had come out in game 2 and game 1, and they had a lead at halftime in game 2. They didn't, they just didn't perform in game 2, especially after that. Which, if you remember, obviously, I think what you wanted to talk about was the Reggie Miller stuff. The Knicks actually won the next 2 games after that.
It's amazing how people have such bad memories. Like people were like showing the anti-Knicks people were showing the Tyrese Halliburton choke sign and the Reggie Miller choke sign. It's like, well, what happened in that series with the Reggie Miller?
But my point is that that Knicks team came out and won the next 2 games, or this Knicks team came out and lost.
Yeah.
I mean, that I would say, like, obviously, like, eras are different, but I think that Knicks team is better than this Knicks team. But yeah, I think that like, I think that their talent level was probably better than this Knicks team. But yeah, I think that the motivation is different. I mean, and also it's a little bit different because I think the Reggie Miller one put them with 3 losses in the series, so it's a little bit different than being game 1. But still,
yeah,
you still want to have that motivation,
right? Right. And also, just everything with this team has just been driving the Knicks. I mean, it's just been driving us completely crazy.
Right.
And I guess, you know what? I think it's easy to hyper focus on all the problems with your team. And look, we're not the only team to win ugly.
No, and the Knicks are also only were playing game 1 against Indiana because of 2 20-point comebacks in the fourth quarter as well.
Right.
Like, the Knicks only won the series against Boston doing basically the same thing, except with a little bit more time left on the clock, but still. Yeah. But not that much. I mean, the Pacers were up 17, I think, or the Knicks were up 17, I think, with like just under 7 minutes, and the Celtics were up 20 with 8 minutes in game 1. Yeah, so it was very similar.
Right. Very, very similar. And one thing that's been happening a lot is Mitchell Robinson has been getting a lot more playing time. These past couple of games, he's played like 29 minutes. And you know what? I think the reason he's been getting it seems like he's been getting a lot more playing time against Indiana than against Boston.
Right.
And that's because he's a lot less of a liability against Indiana offensively than against Boston. Boston hacked Robinson a lot. Indiana hasn't really been hacking Mitchell Robinson. I don't remember him ever being hacked by Indiana. And I think the reason is because Indiana wants to keep the pace of play.
Mm-hmm.
They want to push the pace of play. They are like the fastest. They play like the fastest pace in the NBA, and they want to play their game. And the reason, so fouling Mitchell Robinson and slowing down the game is not going to help them.
Right.
So that's the reason why. And I think the reason the Knicks looked so bad in the first half, or at least for even more than that, is because they were playing Indiana's game. They didn't try to slow down the pace. They were trying to hit a whole bunch of transition threes that they had no business taking.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until they started to slow the game down a little more where they started playing a lot better and they started to make a comeback.
Right. Exactly. And again, like that, but like, which is sort of like what again, you could sort of say the same thing about that Knicks Celtics series, where like once the pace changed when the Celtics were up 20, that's sort of when they came back. But yeah, I mean, so it like, as devastating as it was, like, for game 1, like, you do have to put in perspective and say, well, they're only won because of a team choking. I mean, frankly, like, I actually think that like, Indiana's comeback was more to do with Indiana than the Knicks comeback against the Celtics. Like, I think both Knicks comes back against the Celtics. The Celtics just resigned to shooting threes. when if they had put together plays, they probably would have won the game. Where you have to think about like yes, like the Knicks choked, and there was a lot of things they could have done differently. But the fact is, like, just like a guy hitting 7 threes is just like an otherworldly in a row. It's just like an otherworldly thing. It's just like it's never going to happen. You could play like probably 200 games in a row. He would never hit 7 threes in a row like that. So like the Pacers did get not lucky, but like that was more of like just unbelievable. And then the way that Halliburton's shot went in was like just extremely lucky. And so it was like more of like the Pacers are just played really well on offense. Where I feel like with the Celtics, it was more like, the Knicks are playing well, but the Celtics are just resigning to threes.
Yeah, and I'll get into that in a minute. But I also want to talk about just a little bit about Robinson getting a lot more playing time. I think one of the issues, here's the thing, Robinson is really matches up well for the Knicks against Indiana because he slows down the pace of play. And look, he's a good player because the reason the Celtics kept fouling him is not because he's a bad foul shooter, just because of that. It's also because he's a really good. It's that he's a pain in the ass, and the other team they wanted to get him off the court. If he stunk, they wouldn't be fouling him. But the thing with Robinson is that he can only really play 20 minutes in a game. Like, he does run out of energy fairly quickly. He's good in like certain spurts. Like, he tends to be much better in like he tends to be much better in like in the very beginning of the game rather than the very end. And with him, it's better if you just separate it out in like 6-minute like intervals or some things like that. Moving the goalposts is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, rubbing your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. And now back to the show. In terms of the Knicks, I do want to talk about, obviously, which collapse was worse, because people were comparing this with the Reggie Miller 8 points in 9 seconds game. Mm-hmm. And for me, I actually think, and I think based on what you've been saying, you'd probably agree with me. I think the Reggie Miller 8 points in 9 seconds is substantially worse.
Yeah, a few reasons. The first thing is like you have to realize like the Reggie Miller was all on his own. There was a play where the Knicks, inbounded and they missed the ball and whatever.
It was a terrible inbound pass by Anthony Mason.
8 and 9 seconds, and also like the other thing is like that was not happening in the 90s NBA. Where like today, even though it doesn't happen as quickly, and the Knicks collapse was critical, but double-digit comebacks happen in every single game in the NBA now.
Yeah.
Like, yes, it doesn't happen that way, and it was a complete collapse by the Knicks, but with the three-point shot now, like, it kind of happens a lot. Like we said, the Knicks did it twice. The Pacers actually did it a few times this playoffs, and they did it to Cleveland a couple of times. They did to Milwaukee. So the 8 points in 9 seconds was just like way, way worse because also the Knicks were not up 8 with 9 seconds. Like their lead was a lot, but there was still like some time on the clock. They were up 9 with 51 seconds. So there was 40 something more seconds left on the clock. When they were up that. Yeah, the Reggie Miller one is way worse, especially because nobody shot threes at that time.
Yeah, but it also required a lot more. It required a lot more like fumbling from the Knicks.
Yeah,
than this did. I mean, like, think about it. First of all, Greg Anthony he literally fell down twice in that span because I rewatched it and not rewatch. I wasn't alive for it, but like he fell down twice in those 9 seconds. And not to mention that after he fell down during the inbound pass, Anthony Mason just basically gave it to Indiana. And also, John Starks missed 2 foul shots.
Right.
In that same span. Now, the Knicks missed a couple of foul shots, but you can't argue that the Knicks screwed that game up in the same way that they screwed up the Reggie Miller 8 points and 9 seconds.
And the other thing is Cat and Anunoby is who Indiana would want shooting free throws late, where the John Starks is who the Knicks would want shooting free throws late.
Yeah.
That's another thing. And also, neither of them missed 2 in a row in this situation.
Right.
And also, the Reggie Miller plays were legitimately good plays where, like we talked about, the Halliburton shot was just, the Halliburton shot missed pretty much. And then just the way the ball bounced fell just exactly perfect. It reminded me a lot of the Kawhi Leonard shot to beat the Sixers.
Yeah.
The Reggie Miller one to me is way worse. And it's way worse too. Imagine we weren't alive at that time, but imagine at that time, there was no smartphones and stuff. There was no, so if you shut the game off, if you had left the building, you wouldn't find out till the next morning.
It's crazy to think about too.
Yeah.
But we live in such an instantaneous age. I can check it. Yeah, it's crazy. Imagine going to bed and waking up to find out what happened. The other reason though is that I also think that Indiana, I think that Indiana's comeback in game 1 was more I'm not saying the Knicks didn't choke, but it was more Indiana winning than I think it was the Knicks choking. And I know it's not popular because we all want to focus on the negative, especially if you're a Knicks fan in this case. But to me, I just think Indiana deserves a lot of credit for it. Think about it. Aaron Nesmith hit 6 threes in the fourth quarter. And these weren't easy shots either.
7.
These were contested threes.
7 threes. Yeah, I know.
Was it 7? I thought it was 6.
It was 7 in a row. Yeah.
7. Okay. So he hit 7 threes in a row, and these were contested threes.
Some of them were.
Some of them were contested at least.
But the Knicks did go. They didn't go. And the worst thing they did was when they fouled because they stopped the clock. It was still a choke, but I don't think it's on the level. You know what I really want to find? This would be a gem if I could find it, but I'm going to try and scour the internet for it after this. But the day after the Reggie Miller 8 seconds, the Mike and the Mad Dog after that must have been electric.
Yeah, it's true. It was definitely in the earlier days. You could probably find. You could find. There is footage of the Mike and the Mad Dog, after the Jeffrey Mayer, play. So there might be.
Where does this rank for you, and where did it rank for you in terms of worst losses, sports losses? Obviously,
it's up there. It's up there, but it's not the worst one. It's up there though. I would say the worst loss of my lifetime was probably the Mets game 4 of the Mets and Royals in the World Series. And I think it felt so bad because I was at that game. Right. I think that's the game that Daniel Murphy made that error, and the Mets were winning for most of that game. And then they ended up losing. It didn't end the series, but it was the next game the Mets ended up losing.
Right.
So I think that was the most upset I've been. But I think a lot of it was just because I was there, and I think that just made it so much worse. There's been a lot of games that just made me really upset. Really upsetting losses. This has got to be up there just because of the circumstances of it and the way that shot went in, and how confident I felt that the game. The Knicks. It felt like the Knicks had the game in the bag, and I didn't watch every moment of it when it happened because I was driving. So I thought, okay, the Knicks kind of have it, and then I checked my phone and I saw it's tied at 125, and the game's going to overtime. So what the hell happened? And whenever you you say what the hell happened, that's obviously not good. One of the other games that was really upsetting for me was the Jets-Bills game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you remember that
Yeah.
because I was watching it with
Yeah.
you. that Jets Bills game that in 2016 to miss the playoffs, that was up there. Another game that really I haven't experienced Jet losses of that magnitude. I will have to say I've because they haven't been good enough. But another one of those games was the Victor Cruz 100-yard
Mm-hmm.
run reception.
Yeah.
That was up there too. And I understand it was a regular season game,
Yeah,
but
but
like
both teams had like the same record, right?
yeah. And but like you have to remember at the time the Jets had a shot at making the playoffs, and I was at that
Right.
game. So that just made it so much worse. I guess when
Yeah.
you're there, it feels so much worse. But like this has got to be up there, but it also just depends on what else happens. It really like if they end up winning the series, it just becomes
Right. Of course. Yeah, of course. That's the biggest thing. And I also think if they lose the series in 5, that it also doesn't really matter as much.
right, because then because if they let's say they lose in 7, you can say, oh,
Yeah,
what would have
of
been if we
course.
had won that game, as opposed to if they end up losing anyway. And look, I said beforehand going into the series that I thought that I would lean towards Indiana. I think Indiana would win. I'm not saying the Knicks can't win, but like I think Indiana would win. I think Indiana's a better
Yeah,
team than the
agreed.
Knicks. The only thing is that the Knicks have home court, but like we just said, the home court doesn't even seem to matter that much in this series. Like overall, I just think the Knicks have too many fatal flaws that the Pacers can take advantage
Right.
of. Like the Knicks have Brunson, who is the best player on the court, assuming he can stay on the court and not get into foul trouble, which is one of the biggest problems he's been having. But the Knicks, they just have too many fatal flaws. And like I said before, one of them is that their 2 best players are bad defenders. And having them both on the court at the same time, it creates so many liabilities.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the only plus side is that the Knicks are able to win. Now, I understand it's self-inflicted, but they are able to win with like a hand tied behind their back, which is
Yeah.
which I think is very telling that
Right.
they have that type of resilience. And I think this team, even though I think they're very flawed, is still very resilient. And I don't think they lay down and die. They just lay down and take it. I don't think that happens. I think that, and I think the same thing is true of Indiana. I think it's the same thing is true of both teams. I think that Indiana, I love the way Indiana's offense looks, or hate it in a way. I mean, there's so many guys on that team that could just shoot threes and that they can beat you with. Their pace of play is the fastest, which obviously is a problem for the Knicks. Halliburton is a pain in the ass to guard. He's very unorthodox. And there's just so much. I've never seen a team get so many open looks, so many good shots, and also have enough guys who could hit them. It happened to be Aaron Nesmith in game 1, but I feel like a whole bunch of guys that could have been. It could have been Nimhard. It could have been it could have been Siakam. It could have been Turner. Like it could have been so many. Like it could have been almost anybody that could have gone off in that series. Like if you had Aaron Nesmith was just one of the guys that could have done it. And the Knicks just have too many fatal flaws. I mean, like Towns and Brunson are weak defenders, and they're constantly getting into foul trouble, and that could end up killing us. And by the way, let me just say, I mean, we didn't talk much about game 2, but game 2 almost was the reverse of game 1. That was really, the Knicks were really, really close to pulling off what the Pacers were able to pull off. Like and if not for that foul on Brunson on the inbound pass, remember the inbound pass? It was basically out of bounds. It was basically out of bounds. But Brunson fouled. And that kind of killed, because then the Knicks would have had an inbound pass with a second down 1 with like 14 seconds left, and they could have ended up winning the game. So all of these games really could have just gone either way. All of them.
No, for sure. I think just real quick for the worst losses, I think this is definitely up there. Deshaun Jackson has to be up there. A lot of things.
I knew you were going to bring that one up.
Well, a lot of things that people don't realize about the Deshaun Jackson game was the Giants had a 21-point lead in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And then the Eagles came back to tie it, and then they kicked the Bears. Another one I would put was no, 2 seasons ago, the Giants Jets. The Giants had a lead with like I think like, what they were up. We were up 3 or 4, and they kicked the field goal, and Graham Gano missed it, and then with like
Right.
10 seconds left, the Jets came down and got into field goal position, tied the game, and then the Giants went on to lose, and that was like when both teams were still sort of alive. That was definitely up there. I'll give you one though. Which collapse was worse? The Knicks fourth quarter of Game 1 or the Yankees fifth inning of Game 5?
Yankees fifth inning of Game 5.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, people were comparing them, but I mean, the Knicks didn't. Like I said, like we said before, the Knicks didn't like fumble anything that bad.
And there was 2 massive plays. There was Judge dropped the ball, and then Garrett Cole didn't run to first, and either of those plays would have ended the inning.
Yeah, either of those. Right. Aaron Judge dropping the fly. Yeah, it was there were 2 just awful plays in that inning. And you also have to remember, like, think about it for a second. If either of those plays happen in the middle of like July or something like that, like it's a topic on WFAN the next day. But like fans are pissed off about that. Like, and in the regular season, let alone in a World Series game, and it happens in 1 inning.
Yeah, and I actually think that the Yankees would have had a good chance to win the World Series if they had won that game, because they had a lot of momentum. They had killed the Dodgers the game before. They were killing the Dodgers. Like they were destroying the Dodgers in that game. And then that and the Cole play. I mean, also like Cole gets a lot of flack, but Rizzo also didn't run to first. Like Rizzo should have ran once he saw it. But yeah, I think that is worse. And like you said, like we don't know how this series is going to end up. That was the end of the season for the Yankees. So like that one I think is worse, but it is crazy that they went through 2 of those in the same like span.
But even if the Knicks lose this series in 7, I would still say that's worse.
Oh yeah, of course. And but I think also just because of the unforced errors.
Yeah.
And the Judge thing, and because like also like the I mean, I don't know how their season's going to turn out, but like with like Soto left the next year, so that was like the last iteration of that Yankee team.
Yeah.
So like that was that was worse. And I can't like if like imagine how you felt like if after that Royals game, like imagine being a Yankee fan who was at that game. That must have been like awful.
That's gotta be. I guess both would be sort of similar because they both ended up losing. But yeah, that's got to be worse. That's got to be worse.
You would have to put like I feel like if you were older too, you would probably put like the last game of like 2007 Mets up there as well. Like when they just fully like collapsed.
But I guess the difference is that the 2007 collapse was not a moment or a game; it was a series of games.
What about the Giants guy hitting the home run in the wild card game?
Oh, in 2016?
Yeah.
No, that wasn't because I don't think the Mets were ever winning in that game.
Yeah, it was 0-0, I think, at that point.
I didn't even think the Mets would win that game because the Mets they couldn't hit Bumgarner.
Was that the game where wasn't there a game in the World Series where like the Mets were winning and then Matt Harvey was like, keep me in, and he just got like absolutely shelled?
Oh, that was not the game.
Was that the same game?
No, I was not at that game. That was game, I don't know. It was game 1 or 2.
Maybe. Yeah.
Was it? I don't remember. It was one of. Yeah, I remember when that happened. And Matt Harvey. What happened was Matt Harvey wanted to be the hero.
Yeah, he was like
trying to be a hero, and it fell flat on his face.
Which is like an all-time like it's an all-time like it's either going to go to either extreme. It's either going to be like an all-time like aura moment, or it's going to be like the worst thing ever, and it just turned out to be bad.
Yeah. Well, the thing is though, it's like I don't blame Harvey. I blame Terry Collins. That's Terry Collins' fault. You're the manager. You don't let your players tell you what to do. You're the manager. You tell him, my ass is in the jackpot. That's what you do. like, so for that, I blame Terry Collins a lot more than I blame Matt Harvey. But that would have been a really bad one, a bad collapse to be at. I mean, that's got to be up there. Yeah, I guess I guess you could say, like, when you just talk about moments, those are the worst moments. But the worst collapses, I would say, in history are not moments. It's
Right.
like it's like something that's extended over a period. It's like chronic. Like the Mets collapse in 2007 was not a moment. It was just chronic.
Right.
I guess you could say the worst you could feel was like when Tom Glavine gave up like 7 runs in the first inning against the Marlins. I guess
Right.
maybe that moment, like that was a moment that was so bad. But I guess you could.
Yeah.
To me, it's different. Like I remember, I don't know if you probably don't remember this, but during the 2007 collapse, uh, I remember I went to one of the games. It was the game that that Lastings Milledge hit 2 home runs, and Jose Reyes got into that fight with Miguel Olivo. Um, and the Mets ended up winning that game, actually. And I got to tell you, I would have 10-year-old me would have gone out to fight the Marlins myself. I would have done it
Right.
myself. I was so angry.
Yeah, that's got to be out there. But yeah, like I think, like I mean, like I think, like the the Yankees one was not a moment. Like there was a, like, I think, like you could say, like, for instance, if you wanted to take a moment, same way, like when the Yankees blew a 3-0 lead in the game 7, the guy hit a grand slam in the first inning. Like that could be a moment where you're just like,
Yeah.
it was so deflating. But yeah, like that was a moment. I mean, the two, I guess the biggest obviously is the Falcons, which was just probably the biggest
You're
collapse
a
in
Falcons
history.
fan, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, in terms of all times. Like, I don't know that one. What do you think would be worse? By the way, if you were a fan of either team, I think probably if you were a Falcons fan after that Super Bowl, or if you were a Seahawks fan after that Super Bowl, I feel like the Seahawks one would be worse because you would just replay that in your mind all like the Patriots didn't have a moment
That's
like
a
that.
really good question. Which would be worse? You know what? I think it depends because the thing is, I think it's worse if it's a moment that you could have just like
Right.
if they had just been. It was the dumbest play call they could have done in the moment.
Correct.
Because they didn't just pass it, but they passed it in the middle, which
Right.
was as dumb as you could,
Right.
as dumb as you can get. And you went through that whole season. And if you had just run it, you could
Yeah.
have just won the game easily. Like it's just so unbelievably stupid. And the Falcons, okay, yeah, they blew a 28-3 lead, but it was also against Tom Brady, Bill Belichick. Like it was at least and I understand it was the same team that the Seahawks did it against, but it was a moment that
Right.
they could have taken back that you just want to take back. Whereas with the Falcons, it was at least against a great team.
Right.
However, the flip side of it you have to remember is the Seahawks had just won the Super Bowl.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
The Falcons, have they even been back to the playoffs since?
I don't think so.
I don't think I could be wrong, but like the Falcons haven't even been back since.
Check.
So in some ways, the 28-3 is actually worse, and that was really just their moment. And I understand Seattle hasn't won since, but at least in the moment when it happened, it would have been totally plausible for Seattle to come back to like win the Super Bowl the next year. Like that could have easily happened.
And Seattle's also like Seattle's always like good. Like they're always in there. Yeah, they went to the playoffs the next year. They lost to the Eagles in the divisional round. So they haven't been to the playoffs. They haven't been to the playoffs in 9 years now.
So now they're in a playoff drought. So that's I mean, by the way, there have been a lot of. I would have to ask my dad about this because there's probably been a lot of Jets collapses that I wasn't really alive for, or was too young to really remember that are not really quite on.
Well, the AFC Championship game, they had like a 10-0 lead, right? Something like that against Denver.
Yeah, but no, not against Indianapolis.
No, it was. I'm saying before you were. It was when Testaverde was on the team.
Oh, right. Yes, but
yeah,
I don't think that's that much of a collapse having a 10-0 lead. But I mean, in terms of the AFC Championship games, I was really disappointed. I wouldn't say either of them were huge collapses.
I mean, we actually had a teacher in high school who spent the night staring at the ceiling, didn't sleep after they lost to the Steelers, and then got in and cursed out another coworker. The Jets. I think it was the game against the Steelers, right?
It was the Steelers, I think. This was
Yeah.
before we were there. Yes, that did that did happen. Another collapse we have to talk about, which also was chronic, but not a moment, was the Warriors blowing the 3-1 lead.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then again, you could also put in, obviously. I mean, it's not as big because it wasn't the finals. Oklahoma City blowing a 3-1 lead.
No, the thing is, everybody forgets that because the Warriors blew the 3-1 lead. Everybody seems to forget that Oklahoma City blew the 3-1 lead before that.
Yeah, and that was the Thunder with Durant,
and Westbrook when he was good.
Yeah.
Like that Oklahoma City team, I think they would have won. That team, that was as good as they were going to get. Like, that was their chance. Like, since they stole game 1 on the road against Golden State, that was their chance to really win it all.
And think about, like, if they had won one more game, history would be completely different. I don't think, like, two things. Like, so it was like, I think, like, after, I think there's a story that, like, after the game 7 of the finals, Draymond Green was in, like, the parking lot calling Kevin Durant, like, to talk to him. So if the Oklahoma City wins that series, or if the Warriors win the finals, Durant probably doesn't go to Oklahoma City. Probably doesn't go to Golden State.
Yeah. Or what if, like, yeah. Well,
and if he doesn't go to Golden State, I don't know if he goes.
Do you think he wouldn't have gone to Golden State if the Warriors had won?
I think if the Warriors had won the finals, they wouldn't have recruited Durant as heavily.
I guess that might be true. I guess that makes it. But I think Durant would have likely wanted to go to the Warriors, even if they had ended up winning. Which just changed everything. And I think we both agree that him leaving the Warriors was probably the worst decision he ever made. Yeah, because he wanted to play. In with Kyrie,
right?
In Brooklyn. And by the way, I think that team was really good. It was just circumstantial and all that. And this was back when Kyrie was. I mean, I guess he probably still is, but was like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously that was a really dumb decision by Durant. But yes, that was another really bad collapse by Oklahoma City. I'm trying to think of what other collapses I'm not thinking of.
Well, the Indians were up 3-1 against the Cubs.
Yeah, that's true. That's
in the World Series. There's been a few. I can't think of many of those, but there's been a few. I mean, like, the Yankees had a few where they obviously, the Red Sox one was awful. But the crazy thing about that is I think they had the lead in, like, every game except for the last one.
Yeah,
I believe. And the Yankees were they were up, right, in the game in the 9th inning of game 4 too. I think they were like 2 outs away or something.
Yeah. I think you're right. I don't totally remember it, but
I don't know what the exact scores were, but the Packers against the Seahawks NFC Championship game.
Which year? 2014?
You think so? Yeah. Hold on. It was 2014. I think it might have been
the game that went to overtime.
Yeah. The Packers were up by. They were up by a lot. They were up 13. They were up 16-7 going in, and then they were up 19-7 with like 5 minutes left. I think it was 16-0 at halftime. It was 19-7, and then they needed a touchdown, 2-point conversion, field goals to get into overtime. So that one's up there. It was 19-14 with 2 minutes left, and the Packers were receiving the ball, and they fumbled the onside kick.
Wow.
So there was a couple of them. That one, it was definitely up there. The Giants had one against the 49ers, I think, where they were up like 30 in like 2003. That one has to be up there. I mean, the Braves had a 2-0 lead on the Yankees. They won the first 2 games of the World Series.
Oh, by the way, speaking of collapses, now this was also a chronic collapse, not a moment, but 3 years ago, the Mets, the Mets getting caught by the Braves. That was another one.
Yeah.
That one was bad because it's not even because the Mets were so bad in September, and then they ended up having to play. They ended up having to play the wild card series against the Padres.
Yeah.
And they lost, and it was just, and everything from there just completely fell apart. And then we ended up bouncing back.
Yeah, and I was actually at the game 3. They got one hit in the whole game.
Yeah.
Against Padres. We forgot one too. Steve Bartman too is an all-time collapse.
I guess it's different a little bit.
Well, they were up 4-0, and then the team scored 7 runs in the inning. But baseball,
I always felt bad for Steve Bartman.
Yeah.
Because everybody, if you look at the footage, everybody else was. And by the way, there were other people that were reaching for the ball way more than Steve Bartman was. If the wind was just a little bit different, it would have been somebody else. And if Moises Alou didn't make such a big deal out of it, if he didn't throw a tantrum over it, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal.
But I actually think I agree with all of that, except if I was a Cubs fan in 2003, I would have hated him.
I get that.
I would have hated him.
I get that. I also just don't think it was totally rational. And
just like they love the cut. What's the kid's name with the Yankees? I think you mentioned it earlier.
Jeffrey Mayer.
Yeah,
that was different.
Yeah, that was clear. I mean, that one was way. He was almost on the field.
Right. And the fact that they still called it a home run was just a joke. The fact that they still called it a home run, and he was being lauded as a hero. I get why Yankee fans would do that, but
But also, you think that if the Orioles had hit the same play, they would have called it a home run? No, of course not.
No, it's probably not. I guess the closest. I mean, I guess the closest modern example, would have been those two goofy guys. That guy Austin Capobianco, fighting with Mookie Betts.
Ripped the ball out.
Yeah. Which, by the way, if I could if there was any sort of signed framed picture I could have, if you want to talk about framed pictures to just, if I ever have money to have just have a collection of, I would say the Austin Capobianco picture with Mookie Betts would be up there. The other one would be that Garrett Wilson catch.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be up there. That was amazing because I was at that game. And another one I would say, what another picture I would like to see is, now I know this sounds really random, LeBron looking at J.R. Smith at the end of game 1 of the NBA Finals.
Right.
One year when he forgot the score. That would have been an amazing. I would love to get that picture framed. That would be another one that I think would be.
You know what else is an all-time picture? The Allen Iverson, Tyronn Lue picture is all-time too.
I forgot about that one. That's another one. Yeah, Iverson, Tyronn Lue, that's one. And I have one of Willis Reed scoring on Wilt Chamberlain, signed by Willis Reed. I have the Pete Rose, Bud Harrelson fight. I have that one. Those are probably the two most memorable. Oh, and I have the Mookie Wilson game-winning error, Bill Buckner play. I have that picture.
Right. That was the crazy thing is this is the craziest stat. Since this turn of the century, since 2000, only 2 teams have won a championship in New York. Only the Yankees and the Giants. The Yankees have done it a couple times, and so have the Giants, but still.
Yeah. And the Yankees haven't won in 15 years. I mean, the thing is that I don't think, I guess maybe the reason is because being a New York team is not as big of an advantage as it used to be.
No, but I will say as much as people are oh, the Yankees have been terrible. They haven't been to the World. This was their first time in the World Series in 16 years. The Yankees, any fan of another team would kill to have what the Yankees have. Every single season, they're extremely competitive.
Yeah, that's true.
The Yankees are very rarely not good.
Yeah, it's certainly true. And
all of their problems are in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I will say, would you say that New York is the best sports city?
I think Philadelphia and Boston are really good sports cities.
You think so? I
Yeah.
don't mean in terms of success, just in terms of the fans.
No, in terms of fandom and stuff, yeah.
They might be crazy. I guess they're known for, like, my theory is that Boston is just Philly if they want a bit more. Like,
Yeah.
Boston is just a better version of Philly in every way. It's a nicer city. It's also just not far. It's very similar to Philly in the sense that it's not far from New York, and it's like a slightly smaller city. They have very passionate fans. It's just that their team wins a bit. They're just
the difference, the problem with like New York is that New York is so big. So like, for instance, like I was in Philadelphia one time, and the Phillies were playing the Braves in the playoffs, and it was in Center City, which is sort of downtown area, but not even a joke. Every single person had some sort of Phillies gear on. There was like 65-year-old women leaving the office with Phillies gear, which is harder to do in New York because there's just so many people and so many areas.
Yeah.
But they are terrific, and all of them are kind of sort of similar. Like the Northeast, like people are very similar. Like the Boston, Philly, and New York accents are 3 variations of the same accent.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's similar, and like especially the way the fans are. By the way, I have to say you had a atrocious take on your podcast last week.
What did I say?
Someone is going when the Knicks play the Celtics. The Knicks are playing the Celtics, correct? And someone goes in an Indiana jersey with the prime directive to incite a reaction. That person that is not the same as somebody being assaulted just for wearing the jersey. That person went there just to incite the reaction.
Yes, I agree. I didn't say that didn't happen. By the way, I think you were looking at the very beginning show clip.
I watched the clip where you said where you're talking about should he be assaulted for watch? No, but that guy was purposely what he got from Pat McAfee and stuff. The flying that was what he was looking to happen.
No, I don't disagree with that at all. What I'm saying is the Knicks fans still shouldn't have done it. That's all I said. But I mean, all I said, like, I agree with that completely. I agree that he was looking for a reaction. It's also true that Knicks fans should have just not fallen into that trap and threw garbage at him.
Correct. But I think that if you like the one thing was like when there was criticism of Knicks fans, there's videos all over the internet of somebody in a different jersey walking through the Philadelphia tailgate that's just insanity. Like literally like probably should fear for their lives. And so like there's a lot. The reason I brought that up was a lot of those like I feel like Boston, New York, and Philadelphia fans are similar. And like the outside of those 3 cities, like local sports radio isn't really great, but those 3 cities probably have the best local sports radio.
Oh yeah, I mean New York and Boston especially.
Definitely, yeah, it's a little bit better than Philly, but still, like they have the best. Have you ever heard the I mean, there's an all-time clip. If we could find it, we might have to put it on the ETB. There's of the guy. Have you heard that with the guy He's calling in. I think he was in Voorhees, which is in South Jersey, and he was calling in to Philadelphia Sports Radio talking about how much he hates the Dallas Cowboys. And while he was on the call, he starts pulling somebody over because he was a cop. And he was literally talking about how much he hates the Dallas Cowboys, and he starts pulling somebody over.
Well, I remember there was a similar call into Mike Francesa.
Yeah, a guy got pulled over.
The guy's like, fuck.
Yeah. And then Mike Francesa was like, tell him to put the radio. He's like, put the radio up, and he was like, officer, he wanted to talk about the trade. He was getting worked up about the trade. Which, by the way, I think you should get pulled over now if you are using your cell phone, because who actually like holds their cell phone when they're driving now? Like everybody just connects it to Bluetooth. So like if you're holding your cell phone, you probably deserve to get pulled over.
Well, but New York media. I mean, like the best sports radio, or at least the best local sports shows ever, were all in New York and Boston.
Yeah,
you look at Mike and the Mad Dog, Boomer and Carton, shows like Dennis or Kirk and Callahan.
Yeah,
they're all Boston shows. And if you look at like the team, like the popularity of sports in all 3 of those cities, it's all very similar. Like baseball and football are really big. Basketball is probably right behind. Hockey is bigger than average in the country, and college football isn't very big.
I mean, I think football is big, but I think that the Knicks are bigger than the football teams.
They are. They definitely are.
Only because there's not really a split of Knicks fans, where there's a split of Giant Jet fans, there's a split of Yankee Mets fans.
Right.
There's
No.
not really the same.
I certainly do agree with that. Although I like people say baseball's a dying sport and things like that, but in reality, it's more just like baseball is just really big in certain areas.
Which is always has been.
Right. It's just very baseball is a sport that's not only very insular, but
Right.
also just very localized.
And the stupid thing is like when they're saying like, well, baseball, like look at the World Series viewership. Every single thing, almost besides maybe NFL or whatever, is getting way less viewership. People just don't watch TV like that anymore.
Yeah, because like people like often talk about things like NBA ratings and how how NBA ratings have been down, which
Right.
without ever taking into account any sort of context
Yeah.
behind that. Like people were talking about like we were like trashing the NBA like 5 years ago when they were playing in the bubble. And like,
Yeah.
the NBA ratings are down. It's like, why do you think? Maybe it's because they're playing in a bubble with
Right.
cardboard cutout fans. Like, do you
Right.
think that might be the reason?
And like the craziest thing is like they're up like the NBA is doing like so well. I mean, like if you look at while they were talking about the NBA ratings were way down, at that same time they had sold out 2 games in Paris, France in 2 seconds. So like they're doing really well, and this is by like I would say the standards of both NFL and NBA are the biggest internationally as they've ever been. I think the NFL which is a whole another topic for another day, but I think the NFL has now just gone way overboard with the amount of foreign games. But the NBA, like, yeah, the ratings are okay, but they're doing better. I will say, even though both teams are good and it shouldn't really matter, a sort of a kind of, and this is coming from a Knicks fan, so it is what it is, but a kind of disaster for the NBA would be Indiana and Oklahoma City. Those are 2 really small markets.
Yeah, I think that might. I think it's very much the case that in that every sport is better when teams in New York and LA and Chicago and all the big markets are doing better, which is why baseball's in good shape.
Correct.
It's why baseball's in good shape. Like the best teams in baseball are what? The Mets, Yankees, Dodgers,
Right.
Phillies, Padres,
Yep.
Tigers, Cubs. It's all teams in outside of maybe Detroit. It's like the best teams are all in the big cities.
Right.
Which I mean, New York and LA in
The
particular.
and like even without that, like the Yankees and the Dodgers are a draw to the casual too.
Yeah, and it's like the only like
that.
big national like the Yankees and Dodgers is like I don't know what I'd compare it to, and others put it in NBA terms. I guess it's almost like what the Cavs and Warriors was
Right
about a decade ago.
But it just shows you how good the NFL. Do you know what the smallest market? It just shows you how good the NFL is. Do you know what the smallest market out besides obviously Green Bay is just on its own? But do you know what the smallest market to have a pro sports team is outside of Green Bay?
Outside in all pro sports?
Yeah.
All 4 major sports? Columbus?
Columbus doesn't have a team.
Columbus Blue Jackets.
Oh, yeah. Okay. But all right. So anyway, the answer I was coming up with is Kansas City. It's Kansas City. So
in football?
No, just in general. I forgot about Columbus, but forget them for a second. But Kansas City is the smallest by far outside of Green Bay, especially in the NFL. Yeah. So that just shows you how good the NFL is, that their biggest team has been in their smallest market. And frankly, the 2 biggest teams in the AFC who play each year, they're both in tiny markets.
Buffalo and Kansas City.
Yeah. I mean, Buffalo couldn't support I know they do have an NHL team, but they probably couldn't support an MLB team.
No, and they couldn't support an NBA team either.
No. And so they've been kind of, that just shows you how good they are. But yeah, I think Indiana, and which I do think it's going to be Indiana and Oklahoma City. I just don't know how great that is. And I feel like a lot of these stars now, like SGA and stuff, who obviously is the MVP and whatever, but I feel like Halliburton, like even Brunson, if you're outside, like they haven't become household names yet to enough to where like they'll pull in a casual, like versus maybe a LeBron, Curry, which took them time to get to, but still.
Yeah. And we didn't even get a chance to. By the way, they're playing right now. Do you want to talk about this for a little bit? Apparently, Bill Belichick and Jordon Hudson are engaged.
Yeah, this is crazy, by the way.
It's such a weird This is such a weird dynamic of a relationship because to me, like people are talking about Jordon Hudson being in it for the money, which I think is partly true, just like in all of these kinds of relationships. But I think it's a little more than that. I think a lot of it is more just ambition and power and not just about money because none of us even know who she is if she isn't dating Bill Belichick.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that she just well, there's a few things. Like obviously the relationship is weird from the get-go. And obviously I think, I don't want to whatever, but I think it would be hard for it to be like this. I think there's two things. Like I think that she's attracted to him probably for other things, maybe money-wise, whatever. And I don't think that he's very attracted to her for her personality or whatever because they're 50 years apart. But she just, I don't know, like I don't think she does herself any favors. She doesn't come off as a good, nice person at all. The Pablo Torre podcast he did was terrific, where he just dove into all the kind of stuff he does. And do you know about, so one of our coworkers here made a video. All the video was talking about was how Pablo Torre did a good job with his podcast, and we posted it on our socials. And the person that runs our socials likes to tag everybody, so he must have tagged her.
We do it on this show too,
right? And she responded. Do you know this?
I do know about this.
To the ETB channel Instagram and said basically like that's basically like the reporting was all shoddy. And then our social person responded and said, would you like to come on a podcast and discuss it? And she said, no, I'm good. Karma will win in the end. And so she's come up weird. Like the thing is, like the craziest part is like from all that I've heard, like there's nothing like suspicious about how they've met. So like her cover up of a crime was worse than the crime. Like her saying like, we're not talking about this was like so much worse. I just think that he's in just a weird position where like, it just feels like it's so odd. Like I think that it's odd to look at because you have like what a lot of people would consider the greatest coach of all time. And he's sort of like, it feels like she's like taking over his entire life. Like it just seems odd. It's just a downfall. And I have to say like this, I don't know how you feel and it shouldn't matter, but I feel like then this is like such a first take thing to say, but like I think this will affect like his legacy and how he's looked on. Like, I just think like this will be something that's like,
I think there's a little bit of truth to what you're saying. Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, like, I'm not somebody who thinks that like, look, I'm not a moralist with these types of things. Like they're both adults and things like that. So I don't really care about it in that sense, but it is the strangest relationship. It's also, not only is the relationship strange, but Bill Belichick is also probably one of the biggest control freaks you can imagine. Like, in sports, like, and he is the one in this case who is clearly not wearing the shoes in this relationship. Like, it seems like she's calling all the shots. Imagine, like, who would have ever thought that, like, they would be doing an interview together and the girlfriend is saying, we're not talking about that. I'm shutting this down.
Right.
Which just seems so odd to me. She's almost like become like, why is she even so heavily involved in coaching?
It's crazy. And it sort of like, I have to say, like, a lot of things make sense. Like with her, like where a lot of people thought that this, like, obviously it was odd that no NFL team wanted him once he got fired. And I'm not saying it has to do all with her, but like it probably played a part in it, especially like the way that she's acted. Like she forced her way into a Super Bowl commercial. And stuff like that. And I also think, like, I don't know if you knew this, but like before Belichick got hired, there was a lot of like trustees and stuff at North Carolina who were like very against it. Which seems odd, but now it makes sense. There's a lot of people. I don't agree with these people, and I just think they're overreacting. But there's a lot of people who think he's not going to coach a game for North Carolina. I don't agree with that. I think he will, but
no, I think he will too. I mean, the question is, you're talking about his legacy, and we got to wrap up soon because we're out of time. But one thing that I think will also affect his legacy is how good he is at UNC. Right. I think people will view it that because don't forget, look how bad he was without Brady. And if he doesn't like win, if he's no better than Mac Brown at UNC, I think that's going to affect his legacy too a little bit.
And a lot of that, real quick, just a lot of that is like if you look at college football, just really as you know, like, and you look at last year, like look at Kenny Dillingham, Kurt Signetti, most college football coaches who are successful, and a lot who are unsuccessful. A lot of them that are successful are not big name hires at the start, and a lot of guys that have been big name hires, like Les Miles a few years ago, Mac Brown, like you said, Lincoln Riley, have kind of not really panned out, which I think is going to happen here. I don't think UNC is going to do well.
Well, it's also just, the brand has a lot to do with it, and geography. I mean, not as much as it used to, but geography just has a lot to do with it also. I mean, like there's a reason that, like, I think college football is very geography based, a lot more than college basketball. Like college basketball, like where are the top teams? Like what are the powerhouses in college basketball? It's like Duke, right, UNC, Kentucky, Louisville. Whereas if college basketball was geography based the way college football has been for so many years, the best teams would be in like New York and Chicago.
Yeah.
And none of them are, like, St. John's wouldn't have been irrelevant for so long.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, that's our show this week. We'll be back next week. I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Liam Barg. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DiMart. You can follow Liam at LiamMTGP. You can follow this show at MTGP ETB. You can follow Empty the Bench Show at ETB Network. And we will be back next week. See you guys then.